And right behind me is the Old South Meeting House. Now, this was built in 1729. There was originally a wooden structure here, but it's in 1729 that this brick structure was constructed. And this is a place that is probably most famous for what happened here in 1773. It was right here in the month of December that a meeting was held. And at that meeting, a group of Bostonians voted and decided to march down to Griffin Wharf and to destroy, just a little bit of tea, just 340 chests or so of British tea to protest the Tea Act. Now, some other interesting things about this particular building. That meeting, of course, the Sons of Liberty made sure to have some ringers in the crowd to help steer things in the direction that they wanted it to go. But this building, I mean, it was beautiful inside. It was, you have those individualized, compartmentalized pews. I'm sure there's a word for it. I don't know what the term is, but it was so interesting and calm in there, because even though it's a busy Saturday here in Boston and you've got a lot of people on tours and things going on inside the Old South Meeting House, because you got to pay $10 to get in there, or 15 to do that plus the Old State House. Not a lot of people spend the money to go in there, and I will tell you, you should do it. Lots of interesting information inside as well. This has been a site of, well, let's say free speech for a long time. And so it wasn't just at the time of the American Revolution, but afterward. One interesting thing that we saw in there's a little plaque that talked about what George Washington thought when he came here after the siege of Boston ended. And this had been used by a group of dragoons, as they were known, the Queen's Dragoons. These were King's Dragoons. I don't remember what they were. It was a group of, I don't know if they were loyalist soldiers or British soldiers of some kind. And they had used this building during the time of the siege of Boston and then trashed it on the way out. And George Washington was like, he wasn't impressed by that. He was pretty saddened by the sight he saw when they trashed the place. But anyway, a couple of other things that were interesting. So it's a place of free speech for a long time. At the time of the abolition movement, William Lloyd Garrison was known to give speeches here. He was one of the leading abolitionists in the United States, the publisher of a newspaper known as The Liberator. And there was a big debate that went on in there between the very extremist abolitionists, the very hardcore ones, versus the more conservative abolitionists who wanted to see a more gradual abolition of slavery. And there were a lot of debates within the walls of that church. And that was one of the things that we both talked about when we were in there. Man, if these walls could talk, the number of famous people that have come through here, the number of history, they had a very strict free speech policy that they established in the 1920s, where they absolutely said this is a place where people have the right to express opinions. And that came to a head as you had the anarchist movement, the communist movements that were gaining popularity at that time. And there were debates over the Sacco and Vanzetti arrests, the famous anarchists here in Boston who were accused of murder and were tried, convicted, and executed right here in Boston. These were two Italian immigrants who were anarchists. So this is a place that has featured prominently throughout history. One interesting thing also, about 100 years after the events of the American Revolution in the late 19th century, the congregation moved to a place in the Back Bay here in Boston, and they were talking about tearing the building down. And interestingly, William Lloyd Garrison, this prominent abolitionist, this is a few years after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, was like, yeah, tear it down. He's like, I think that we venerate our founding fathers too much. They weren't perfect guys, and they certainly, many of them supported slavery. Tear it down. Fortunately, that did not happen. And not surprisingly, it was a group of local women who raised money, protested, and managed to keep this building standing, and we are the beneficiaries of that today. So a couple of other things right in this square, right in this area that are of interest. Just down the street there that runs alongside the building, you can see Ben Franklin's birthplace. Birthplace. It's marked kind of up high on a building. The actual building is not standing. It's clearly a much more modern building, but that's the spot where Ben Franklin was born. He was, of course, born here in Boston, even though at age 17 he left and went to Philadelphia and never really looked back other than to build a fancy memorial for his parents once he got rich. That's in the burying ground here, the Granary burying ground. One other very interesting thing of note here is the oldest commercial building in Boston, some say in all of the United States, is the Old Corner Bookstore, which you can see today is a Chipotle. Still a commercial building, but maybe not the same as the Old Corner Bookstore. But hey, there it is in all of its glory. We'll be eating there later. No, we won't. But it's cool that that building is still standing and still a commercial building. Yeah. But anyway, great sight to see. Again, you can see this and the old State House on the inside, which one of the cool things about the old State House is the fact that it also is a stop for the T. That's the subway here, right there at the old State House, like within the old State House. You know, you got to repurpose things to keep these old buildings alive. Oh, one other interesting thing about the old State House while I'm thinking about it. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was read aloud to the people of Boston for the first time from the little kind of balcony area there. And at the time of our bicentennial, so 1976, when we were celebrating 200 years since the Declaration of Independence, a very interesting person read the Declaration of Independence from the balcony there. And it's not who you'd expect. It was Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, she actually read our Declaration of Independence from Boston, from the balcony of the old State House. So, cool little fun fact for you. All right, well, last day in Boston. We've loved it here. Definitely recommend a visit.